So we're going to start tackling this primary ignition harness. Out of my alarm system, here's for my starter kill, ignition 1, ignition 2, starter output, and accessory for the heat. My two constant inputs for my power. Over here, this is my constant power and my ground for my power window module, my Omega AU93. And this here is also the regular ground for the alarm system. I don't want to connect my ground right now, and the reason why is because I'm doing all the powers. If I connect the ground, every time I move a muscle, my radar sensor, the shock sensor, or something's going to pick up and the alarm's going to go clickety-clack, and it's going to drive me crazy. So I'm not going to do that. But don't ask me why, but for whatever reason, for however long I've been installing, I've always done it this way. I always do my powers first. It's just me. It doesn't mean that you have to be this way, but if you're taking the time to watch this entire tutorial, I will presume you're doing it for good reason, because you want to learn how to do it like me. So it's not right, it's not wrong, it doesn't really matter, but this is just the way I do it. So I'll just get that said. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get all my primary ignition outputs stripped back beforehand, so that way I can go over there and knock them out one by one. And since I'm working on this 04 Chevy, all these Chevys from 99 to, like, you know, later 2000s all shared the same exact colors. So it's like, for me, or anybody who's had experience doing starters before, idiot proof. It's completely idiot proof. And it also makes it much easier for me to explain to you what I'm doing, because I've done this only 1,000 times, and that's a conservative figure. So what I'm going to do here is to save myself a little bit of work. This here, purple, is my remote starter's starter output wire. I'm gonna tie this into the half of the starter kill relay, the starter side, because when you do an alarm, if the alarm is engaged and the starter disable is engaged, you have to throw power from the remote start to the starter side, not to the key side, because then otherwise it would never crank. So that's my starter side of the starter kill relay. This here is the key side. So I'm going to go over to the starter wire in the ignition harness, cut it in half. This side I'm going to put to the key side running up to the key. This side's going to go to the starter side. Get a little bit more wire in there than I need to, so I'm just going to insulate this for protection. And this band-aid is not helping. This car bit me before. This damn car took a nibble out of me. Okay, so there's all that stuff. So I'm going to move all this right over here. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to grab onto something with a wire tie to keep this, give me a little bit of slack so the wires don't constantly keep getting pulled back, because that'll help me do my job a lot better. Whenever you're doing your own installation, try to do it on your terms, not on the car's terms. I know that sounds like common sense, but so many people just don't do it. And you know what they say about people, why they have so much common sense? Because they never use any. Okay, so this here is my constant power from my power window module. I'm going to share this with one of those reds from the alarm's power. Doesn't matter which one. Both of these circuits, I believe, are 30 amp. And the power window module doesn't really draw all that much. So this wire will be more than substantial for the purpose. And while I have the ground out, I'm just going to strip it back, because I'm already stripping wires. And I want to join that to the ground for the alarm system, the primary ground for the alarm. Now while I'm at that, you know what, I'm not going to put a ring terminal on there yet, because I'm not really sure where I'm going to wind up on for my ground. Actually, this wire right here isn't looking all that bad, but I'm not going to do my ground. Like I said, it's tempting, but I'm not going to do the ground. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to move over to here. I'm going to start doing all my powers. First one's first is going to be one of my reds. It's going to be constant 12 volts. Be very careful. Don't be as wild swinging around a metallic hook tool under this solid piece of metal underdash, because you know I don't disconnect my batteries. That's for pussies. I'll be back. Hang on. Let me just ground this thing before this thing goes nuts. I guess I went and ground it. The system's obviously getting ground from someplace else. Oh, shut the fuck up. What? You're all happy and shit. This fucking... I can't work with this motherfucking thing. Oh, fuck off me. What kind of shitty ass fucking band-aids is one to buy? Fucking garbage. Alright. You're not recording, are you?
Yeah.
This fucking thing. Alright, so here, I'm doing the ground. Tune in for the blooper reel. Alright, so I had to throw the ground on because the alarm decided to go wacko. It was getting backfeed ground from someplace. So I got my one constant 12 volt connection on there. So I'm going to go ahead and insulate that. Now on any of these ignition harnesses, treat these differently than you do on any other connection in this vehicle, and here's why. These things have some really hard, pokey kind of wires, and you don't want those to accidentally poke through something and short. I mean, you don't want anything to short, but these wires, I find, from my experience, are very susceptible to that. I think GM got a deal on the hardest copper wires when they made these cars. Now here's my second ignition, my second constant 12 volt. Excuse me. I'm going to connect this one to that. Through it goes and wrap it around like that. See, we're going to have to put the system into valet because the radar sensor is picking up every time I move, or the shock sensor when I kick it with my foot. I don't know what's causing this thing to trip, but at this point, if you don't do something, put into valet or just not have your siren installed yet, that will drive you crazy. Okay, so there's my two constants. I'm going to move along to my yellow, is going to be the hardest connection in here because of space limitations. I'm going to chop that sucker like that. Strip back about 1/4 inch of insulation, if you'll let me. 1/4 on the key side. Don't pull on it like a lunatic like I am, because you could accidentally break it off of your ignition cylinder, and that wouldn't be a good thing. Don't be like me in that respect. Okay, so here's my starter circuit. What we're going to do is grab the key side. Okay. Make sure. Okay, onto the starter side of the starter wire circuit now. Okay, starter kill's done, starter connection's done. Now all we got left is heat accessory, or AC accessory right here, ignition 1 and ignition 2. So pink is my primary ignition 1 in this vehicle. Go. Right. Okay. Next ignition is going to be green. That's ignition 2 in this vehicle. A very important note about ignition wires. When you're testing ignition wires, they should rest at ground. They should show 12 volts in the accessory, the ignition position, as well as during the crank position. That's what discerns an ignition wire from an accessory wire, just so you know. So keep that little tip in mind whenever you're testing ignition wires. It's very important. A lot of people never quite understand that, and they wonder why their vehicles don't work properly after the fact, and that's usually the reason why. Simple things like that get overlooked. Okay, so ignition 2. And also, it's like for this car here, this GM, on the tech sheet it tells you on the notes that ignition number 2 has to be powered on and treated as ignition, or the car won't even crank. Some cars are weird like that. This car is one of those weird cars. So it can cause chaos, not just for remote starting, but it could cause reasons why you could test your wires and see that all your stuff is powered up, accessories on and everything like that, but since the car didn't see 12 volts during crank, or the absence of 12 volts during the crank, could make the difference between a successful and a very unsuccessful installation. So there's another tip for you. Now I have 2 accessory wires, and my sheet said brown is going to be for my AC, and that's really what we need. We don't need the radio on. Where we live, it gets hot like it is today. I am hot today. I am sweating it up for you. I am working, doing this hard physical labor, instead of being in front of my soft chair, in front of my big screen. What am I thinking? So this here is my last connection for my ignition harness. See how quick that goes? That's how it is. Now, after I get done insulating this last wire, I want to show you something else that you should definitely do. No matter who you are, what kind of car you have, or whatever your story is, this is a must. This is not a request or suggestion. This is a must for anybody. I've always taught this. Safety first. This here is my primary ignition harness. Around where all the connections are made, take a wire tie, like I use these 8-inch wire ties, and wrap them all around. Why do I do this, you want to know? Because tape stinks. Tape can fail, it can get hot, it can just be cheap tape. And plus, when I get done moving all the stuff and placing things and changing things around that weren't originally done from the factory, it could put excessive pressure on certain wires, and when that does happen, make sure that all the pressure from these wires is resting upon one of these wire ties, protecting your wiring, protecting your stock wiring. That should be your first and foremost concern, is reliability and the sanctity of your work that you put in there. Put your workmanship first. These are the little things that you need to do to make your installation great instead of just being good enough. Same thing goes for here. This is the harness where I grab my horn. Put it back better than you found it. I know it may sound Boy Scoutish. Put it back better than you found it. Wire ties are cheap. Mistakes are expensive. So that's all done. Now what we got to do here is we still got door trigger, door locks, parking lights. I don't know what the hell these things are. I have some of these things labeled. Oh, channel 3, it's a power window module, factory dis-home wires. And what else we got here? We have shock sensor, radar sensor. So while we're here, just to clean up this mess somewhat,